races to handicap. 20 horses, the pace, the players, and the prices that matter. Lucky for you, I am here with two of the brightest handicapping minds in the business. Christina Blacker, happy to be joined by Matt Bernier and Caleb Keller. And gentlemen, we have a lot to get to today, but Caleb, I'll ask you first. Growing up locally here near Louisville, what was it like as you get closer and closer to Derby Day?
Best time of year here for Derby City. And of course, we have the 2-week Derby Festival, which is an amazing lead in 2 weeks for 2 minutes of racing time. And I never once went to school on Oaks Day, as pretty much the whole city is off school there for the Friday before the Derby. And even going back to elementary, we had a stick pony Kentucky Derby around the bus ring.
Matt, you've been covering the prep races for us here on FanDuel TV for weeks and months. But what's it like for you now in terms of the process? You know these horses, but how do you hone in on the data?
It's a little bit, Caleb, like the NFL draft, where there's all those weeks and months leading up to the actual event, and you get all these front offices that rethink things and second guess themselves. Stick to your guns. You've gone through, you know what these horses are at this point. Don't listen to what we say, listen to what we say. But at the end of the day, it's your money, your opinions. Make your wagers accordingly.
We hope that by the end of the show, you have found your Derby horse. Let's take a look at what's on the agenda here over the next 30 minutes or so. We're going to talk about the weather and how that may or may not impact the racetrack. We're all going to journalism school. We'll talk about the pace, the pedigree. We'll play the percentages in terms of this field. Venmo. Let's talk about all the different wagers that circle into the Kentucky Derby. We'll swing for the fences with some big prices. I will put these two on the hot seat in the lightning round. And finally, our picks and selections. As I mentioned, first point is the weather, because this certainly affects the racing. It can affect who you select in the race. It can affect the pace as well. Matt, how are we looking in terms of weather for the weekend?
Well, knock wood, we're going to be okay by Friday and Saturday, but we do have some rain coming in here beginning later on this afternoon. You can feel it in the air right now. It's a humid 81 degrees locally, but you can see, Caleb, I think the rain is supposed to let up into Friday morning overnight, into the 2-3 o'clock hour. If that's the case, knock wood, fingers crossed, we're fast by Oaks time and certainly fast on Derby Day.
It has been a moving target. I saw the weather a couple weeks ago, and it was like projected to be high 50s. That was going to be no fun. And then we saw some raindrops that snuck into the Saturday forecast. But like you mentioned, if it does happen, it'd probably be overnight, 12 to 3. So everybody's pretty excited about a fast track on Saturday.
It was beautiful last year. Let's hope for the same for Derby at 151. Let's take a look at the field. The odds have been drawn. We had an interesting coverage of the post position draw a couple nights ago. $5 million on the line. 3-year-olds at the classic distance of 1.25 miles. Caleb, any big winners or losers in terms of the post?
I think that as we got to only 3 horses left to draw, Bob Baffer was getting nervous because Citizen Bull had the 1 and the 2 was still open, and Rodriguez still had not pulled his post. But they go 1 and 4, pretty good for certainly the favorite journalism. And then Matt, the outside contenders, I think we're pretty happy with it as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Sandman would be considered a winner drawing that far out, given his little quirkiness as far as his running style is concerned. But when push comes to shove, they got to run the race wherever you're breaking from. No time to cry about it now. Let's
start with the favorite, Journalism, installed at 3-1 on the morning line. Matt, what makes this horse so good? What are the positives in his favor? Why is he our favorite?
I'll tell you what, he stacks up pretty favorably as far as favorites are concerned leading into the Kentucky Derby in recent memory. You take a look at the speed figures that he's earned, specifically the Beyer speed figures. He owns the 2 fastest Beyers coming into this year's Kentucky Derby. He's undefeated going around 2 turns, and he gives off every indication that 10 furlongs on Saturday is going to be his friend. Caleb, among the fastest Derby prep horses entering the Kentucky Derby in recent memory as far as speed figures are concerned. That includes American Pharoah, Justify, California Chrome.
So many pros, and it feels like so few cons. But if there was going to be a potential con here for the favorite, I've gone back for the last 25 years, and I've seen where the winner sat through the half-mile position. And as we look at the data, to no surprise, the first quadrant has the most winners. But then the second most winning quadrant is actually the last quadrant, 16 through 20. And in between's probably been the toughest to navigate the roses. And I do feel that Journalism has a great chance of sitting 6 through 15. So if he wins, probably be from the least winning quadrant of the last quarter century.
Matt, you mentioned some of those other favorites like American Pharoah, like Justify, like California Chrome. How does Journalism stack up against favorites of years past?
On numbers, he's very comparable as far as the 108 Beyer is concerned. The only one that was comparable was actually California Chrome. But I think the running style is a little bit different. Chrome and Pharoah seem to have a bit of brilliance to them. Justify, I don't want to say he was a grinder because he was one that was forwardly placed, but I get more Justify vibes for Journalism than I do Pharoah or Chrome.
Justify, Chrome, Journalism, and even American Pharoah. Can we take out Materiality's big number in the Florida Derby? Yep. If you take that out, all 4 of these horses had a double over. They had 2 Beyer speed figures that were better than the rest of the field.
Looking forward to our favorite journalism. Lots of people will be centering in on him. Not necessarily a bad thing to like the favorite. 10 of the last 13 years, the favorite in the Derby has run first or second. Pace makes the race. We say it all the time, that old adage. But in a 20-horse field, it can be chaotic, and pace can also be the great equalizer. Caleb, let's start with the speed. Let's talk about who is going to be on the lead and how you see that setting up.
Well, let's look at 4 need-the-lead front runners in the race. I would be completely shocked if it's not one of these 4 horses. But before we get there, I want to show you what an elite-level Grade 1 front runner looks like. Let's look at Bayern. Okay, look at all the times in yellow. When he hit the lead, not only did he win the race, but he would widen. But check out the Travers and the Preakness. That was a healthy horse that got the lead taken away from him, and you saw what happened. He got beat 20-something lengths. And we've seen that these horses, when the lead has been taken away, they've been beaten 10, 15, 20 lengths. Bayern is your prototypical need-the-lead Grade 1 horse. We got a few of them in this race.
Yeah, one of them breaking from the inside post, and he's certainly committed in terms of those tactics. That Citizen Bull, I'm already having flashbacks to looking at Lucky for Bob Baffert. You don't get out of the gate, your race is over in those first few jumps. Let's start with him and his speed.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's got one way to go, and to me, I have questions about has he improved from 2 to 3, but more importantly, I don't think he'd pass a parked car if he needed to. So down on the rail, you've got one way to go if you're Martin Garcia. You step on the gas, you go as fast as you can for as far as you can.
Through a quarter mile, he's 3 for 3 on the lead at a route. He only lost that one race where he didn't have the lead. That was in the Santa Anita Derby. And also, he's had a little stumble. If you go back the first race of this year, Citizen Bull had a stumble, but he recovered because he was up against the stablemates. Last time, I wouldn't call it a stumble, but a bit of a hitch in the stride. He's got one funky step, and then he hits full speed.
The other Baffert, Rodriguez, not drawn too far away from him in post position 4. He's very similar on paper, Caleb.
He's exactly like his sire, Authentic. When Authentic didn't have the lead, and when he was on the outside, like in the Santa Anita Derby or the Preakness, he kind of got lost. But when he got the lead and the rail and kind of specified the leads, made it a little bit more simple to just follow the lead to guide around, he was a much more effective horse.
And it's not to say that he's not a good horse, it's just that he needs things to go his way the same as Citizen Bull. And I mean, I think that's part and parcel. Bob Baffert trains his horses for speed. The problem is now when they all have to run into each other, something's got to give.
Right. I think another horse that's interesting from this perspective is East Avenue, and I get the feeling that down the line in the future, they will teach him to rate. They will teach him to relax. But you're out of time now, and their only option is to go for it.
And they put blinkers on Caleb before the Bluegrass, and we saw wicked pace early on. You and I talked about it leading into this show today. You take a look at the races where he hasn't had the lead, they've been disasters.
He's almost 2 for 2 on the lead. He got beat just the nose in the Bluegrass. His stock price has fallen. The market's crashed on East Avenue, but he did have a new high-speed figure, 96 buyer at Keeneland. He was the buzz horse at the Breeders' Cup Work Show. Couple bad races, and all of a sudden he's the forgotten horse of the race.
I mean, I was willing to make him my Derby horse before the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and then look at how his year is sort of unraveled in a way. I just feel like they need more time with East Avenue. Owen Almighty, a speed horse, but drawn all the way outside. How much are they going to use him from post 20?
I don't think they're going to at this point, honestly. I have reservations about how far he wants to go. Now you've got the outside draw, and if you use your gas early, he'd have no chance of getting 10 furlongs.
So we've combined them all. These horses are 7 for 8 on the lead with a nose loss, and including Owen Almighty, they've never won a race when they didn't have the lead. And as a matter of fact, those 4 horses, the 8 times they didn't make the lead, they got beat 63 lengths. And the races they've won by almost 30. So 4 need the lead horses in the race.
We've talked about a lot of speed horses. Is there a scenario in either one of your minds where one of these speed horses can wire the field?
I don't think so. If they do wire the field, it is an otherworldly kind of performance, one that would go down in history books because this pace is going to be ballistic early on.
I've said that if there's 2 and exactly 2 speed horses in the race, just play the speed horses. Like, they're going to work it out. Look back at War Emblem. There was 2 speed horses in the race. They went 1-2 the whole way. We've got 3 or 4 in this race, and that makes a really contested early tempo.
New Equos could jump up in there as well. Plenty of speed in this race. Let's play the percentages here. And Matt Bernier, you've given us your fair odds on these horses. These are parimutuel odds. They're going to fluctuate. They're going to change. But at what point do you determine whether each of these horses is a good bet for you or a horse that you're willing to walk away from?
Well, you're going to have to wait till the last second, if possible, when you see on Saturday afternoon where it looks like the board is going to shake down. This is my opinion, what I think is a fair number on each one of these runners, and you don't even need to go down to the 10th of a point if you do it at home. You can just use just those straight hole numbers. I think at 3-1, journalism would be a playable number, but you'll note there's a number of other horses that are big prices that aren't near their morning line odds, Caleb, and that's simply because you kind of touched on it. We've hit a point in time where a lot of these long shots, for whatever reason, end up taking more money than they should. To me, as you can see, I've got about 6 or 7 horses that should be north of 50-1.
I think what stands out about the chart here from your numbers, Matt, is that we've got 3 horses over 100 to 1. We've got almost a third of the field over 50 to 1, and meanwhile, there's not going to be many horses that are over 50 to 1. And that Rich Strike effect. The race after Rich Strike won the Derby, the Preakness, the betting public just kept on betting the longest price in the field. Like 13 to 1 at one point was the longest price in the field. So that's still fresh in our mind. It shows you that the horse that do actually have a chance really going to be valued, because these other horses probably should be 50 or 100 to 1.
Well, and we're talking over $100 million in the win, place, and show pool. And you get those casual bettors that are betting the Sandmans, and just the hunch plays really do affect the wagering.
And it goes back to the idea that betting a favorite in a race like this is not a bad thing. You may end up getting an actual very square price on a horse that, to Caleb's point, has 2 numbers that are faster than anything anybody else has ever run.
And we're talking about the land of opportunity trying to hit big, but the most simple bet, which never gets talked about in the Derby, let's look at Justify, American Pharoah, California Chrome, Big Brown, all giant favorites, all big winners. They all paid over $4 to show. And the basic principle behind a bet, the original basic principle was bet one to win one. And for $4, even if journalism hits the board, there's a chance you could double your money.
And Jose Contreras made the point this week that if you want to place your win and place bet into the exacta pool and just mask your win wager that way, a year like Epicenter, where you get that price horse on top, it's only over $2,000 for the exacta.
You can use the favorite to your advantage in a race like this in ways that you can't always do that on a day-to-day basis.
Even too, real quickly here, when Mind That Bird won, a lot of sharp players keyed American Pharoah's sire, Pioneer of the Nile. He was one of the buzz horses. He finished the second. You willed him and all. You got a rich exacta.
We could go on and on. Speaking of Rich Strike, the Mind That Birds of the world. Every horse deserves to be here. Every horse deserves a word on a Handicapper's Preview show. So let's rattle through the field. We'll start with Citizen Bull, and you can give some of your opinions and insights on each of these runners, gentlemen.
He's a 2-year-old champion. He comes into this race off of a loss in the Santa Anita Derby. Unfortunately for him, has to go from the rail.
Neo Equos, the long shot, could get the champion jockey Flavio Pratt. Look at his record in this race. It is incredible.
Final Gambit going out for trainer Brad Cox, going to be rolling from the back of the pack. The question for him, first-time career on dirt in the afternoon.
Rodriguez, his sire, won the Derby. There's 400 buyers in the race. Journalism's got 2. Rodriguez has the other 2.
Don't sleep on the coach Wayne Lucas in the Kentucky Derby. American Promise has a giant buyer and a giant thoroughgraph rating coming into this race. He figures to be forwardly placed as well.
Going to see coming up next, Admire Daytona is the, quote, other Japanese horse. But last year, the other Japanese horse, T.O. Password, ran 5th. And, of course, Forever Young ran 3rd. And, Matt, both Japanese horses right next to each other.
Luxor Cafe, the more fancied of the 2 Japanese runners this year. Not quite the same buzz as Forever Young last year, but making a good impression here locally.
Journalism, here he is, the big dog, the favorite, undefeated around 2 turns, and comes in looking very strong.
Burnham Square got back on the beam in the Grade 1 Bluegrass, rolling from the back of the pack to score for Ian Wilkes. Made a good impression here locally. He's going to be rolling from the back of the pack as well.
The other Curlin from Journalism is Grande. In my mind, buy stock now. Very unexposed, very lightly raced, super wide in the Wood Memorial. This horse is going in the right direction. I love how he looks on the track.
Flying Mohawk was no match for Final Gambit, partially owned by Jason Worth. He'll be rolling from the back of the pack for trainer Whit Beckman.
Some people last fall thought East Avenue would probably be the favorite potentially in the Derby, myself included, but he's fallen off. Now he's a long shot.
The lone maiden in the field is Publisher, and wouldn't it be fitting if Steve Asmussen got his first Kentucky Derby victory with a horse who's never won before?
And even though his other contender, Tistastic, was long odds in the Louisiana Derby, Asmussen was very confident, worked out a good trip, and Joel Rosario delivered him for the score.
Rendered Judgment Connections were a bit unsure if they were even going to run in this year's Kentucky Derby. Ultimately chose to enter him. He deserves to be 30 to 1 on the morning line. Going to need to run the race of his life. One of the stories of the trail, Cole Battle. He won his first 5 dirt races, and he keeps on overextending himself. Lonnie Bry, this is his first ever graded stakes winner, and he comes to Louisville. Sandman, a $1.2 million purchase. He is going the right direction for trainer Mark Cassie. A win in the Grade 1 Arkansas Derby has him ready to go the first Saturday in May. Bill Mott's already got a Derby win with, of course, Country House, but he wants one across the wire. And Sovereignty looks to love the track here at Churchill Downs. Comes off a second in the Florida Derby and has a late closing kick. Chunk of Gold has never run a bad race on dirt. The 2 runs at the fairgrounds, a couple of 92 Beyer speed figures. The outside draw, a bit of a concern, but he's coming into this in good form. And then Owen Almighty, they were back and forth. Will they go? Will they not? Spitestown going to have his first runner in the Kentucky Derby, and they hooked the 20 post, 5 for 7 in the exacta, and also 1 on debut at Churchill. It's a lot of info in 14 minutes. We'll let you guys take a breather. First half of the Handicappers Preview Show in the books. Let's send it to the studio with Dubs Anderson while we reset for the second half of our show.
Thank you, team. A good chance to take a look at the 2 international runners coming into race day on Saturday afternoon. And I do believe it's only a matter of time before we see success on the greatest stage here in North America from one of the international raiders. And we turn it back to last year's race. Teo Password, Forever Young, both coming across from Japan. 2 of the top 5. They are getting closer and closer. Now, you look at the form line down this race. Well, Forever Young has turned out to be a pretty decent-looking racehorse. One of the best, one of the top-rated in the world right now. So what's it going to take to get it done in 2025? They send across 2 really strong chances. Admire Daytona, a winner of the UAE Derby, has got it done travelling, should enjoy the new looking environment out there at Churchill Downs. Certainly has that versatility, and we'll be looking right along next door to find our best mate in Luxor Cafe. So this was a massive effort going back to Meydan. You'll see that turn of foot late. Christophe Lemaire, one of the best pilots in the world. He'll regain the riding duties coming back in to the Kentucky Derby. So there's a lot of polish here for Admire Daytona. Booked at 30-1 on the morning line, but will not be the top choice for mine out of the 2 Japanese entries. Luxor Cafe, Admire Daytona have squared off on 2 occasions. Luxor Cafe got the better on both. Luxor Cafe has won 4 races on the bounce, looking to make it 5. And you look at this race and say, well, Dubsy, we're going in the wrong direction. We're doing a right-hander. Well, Luxor Cafe's won 2 at the left turn, 2 at the right turn, and look at this finish. Son of American Pharaoh, the 10-year anniversary. It was the magic man, Joey Moreira, who's called Hong Kong home for some years, has dominated in the Southern Hemisphere and looks to do the same this Saturday out at Churchill Downs. For Mr. Horry, Luxor Cafe, certainly a live chance coming in for this race. Has the finish, has the fitness, should appreciate the distance with some of the biggest connections in the game priming up. It's the travel across to North America. That's the only cause for concern. But I think there is so much talent, so much promise. And being the son of American Pharaoh, 10 years on from that massive win in the 2015 Kentucky Derby, Luxor Cafe is the top selection for me in winning this year's Kentucky Derby. Christina.
Dubs, thank you very much. Strong push on a Luxor Cafe from the studio. And Caleb, did I read this correctly from track announcer Travis Stone? This is the first time we've seen starters from American Pharaoh in the Kentucky Derby, 10 years since his win?
Hard to believe. And, he's making up for lost time because Luxor Cafe, a key contender, publisher, even he was the damn sire Barnes, who was one of the early favorites at one point here in the trail. But I know Dubs, I think, has got a future bet nearly 100-1 on Luxor Cafe. I asked if I could buy a chunk. He respectfully declined.
Speaking of sires, Tappet, one of the most influential sires of the 21st century, he continues to have an impact on this race. But Caleb, he's yet to have a winner. What are we missing here for him to actually get a horse across the line first?
He's known for high energy, and sometimes that might work against you essentially on a Derby day. But starting with Hansen in 2012, about 13 straight years of a Derby contender, and a lot of them were certainly well fancied. He's had a few bays and chestnuts, Tapiture, Normandy Invasion, and Hofford, but other than that, these are gray stamped progeny.
These are big gray horses, and I think the common theme when you take a look at that list, Christina, while they haven't been able to get over the hump here in the Derby, they do a little bit better when you give them a little bit more real estate to work with, and I think it's part and parcel. We talk about the Belmont Stakes at 1.5 miles, them having success. It's also usually a smaller field, and a lot of them are able to get out into the clear. The problem with the Tappets here locally is when they get down to the inside, they kind of lose their cool a little bit.
Very similar with Tappet Trice. Even the jockey told us with Tappet Trice that he did not like kickback, and they tried to extricate him off of the rail. And it's kind of been wild that he's had 5 fourth-place finishers. Tacitus was moved up to 3rd via disqualification with maximum security, but 4th to this point has been Tappet's ceiling in the Kentucky Derby.
I'll ask you about Sandman, the Tappet offspring. Do either one of you see him eclipsing that? Is Sandman a first, second, or third place horse?
Maybe he truly has improved so much, but I've got some concerns, Matt. He's still weaving through the stretch in every race, and also 3 races at Churchill Downs, not very strong performances.
I have a difficult time envisioning you delivering a peak effort in front of 150,000 people at 10 furlongs with 19 others if you're not totally locked in. I don't think he's quite there yet.
Pressure on for all of these horses. Pressure's on for us to make our Kentucky Derby selections and to use your Derby horse with some of the other wagers that are available for you. We went to journalism school, time to go back to high school math. You guys remember the old school Venn diagrams? We've gone with a Venn diagram here in terms of the Kentucky Derby itself. So many different opportunities for you to use that selection to your advantage.
Yeah, and the Derby is just such the linchpin of so many things, whether it be just on Saturday or, Caleb, as you've touched on and we've talked about a lot, the 2-day wagers that link up and wrap up with the Derby.
Oaks Derby Double is always a really popular wager, and I think we're going to have a couple big favorites in that. Even the doubles, you can link the Derby to the race before or the race after, a myriad of pick 4s and pick 5s, even a pick 3. There's 3 of them that you can play, 3 different pick 3s you can play all through the Derby.
Lots to choose from on the wagering menu. Let's take a look at that for you right now. And it's so great to have these past performances available, to have the data early, to have the extra time to continue to study and to try to put those tickets together. Here's a look at the wagering menu on Kentucky Derby Day here at Churchill Downs. It's going to be a full card. We'll start bright and early with our on-site coverage here. We begin with maiden special weight runners. You have a couple of races just to warm up, and then we jump into those stakes races.
And you've got some unique wagers as well. Take a look at the all-stakes dirt pick 5. That's something that you can sink your teeth into early, and that will go right on through the Kentucky Derby as well.
And I've got a multi-day crossover ticket. It's going to be the Oaks, the Old Forester, and the Kentucky Derby. So Oaks, I'm going Good Cheer and Tenma. Cox and Baffer, they've run away from many fields together. I think they have a chance to do that on Friday. I thought the Old Forester was much more competitive than in recent years where we've had big favorites. I've got the 1 Integration. The 6, I think, is the key horse there. Taking Candy could be live. The 7 Running Bee and the 10 had a very wide trip, Spirit of St. Louis. And if we can get to the Kentucky Derby, I'm going to take a spread approach here. Rodriguez on the come up to 4. Luxor Cafe looking strong. Of course, Journalism. I think Grande is a star on the rise. I haven't forgot about the talent of East Avenue, the number 12, and Sovereignty, who loves the track.
Caleb's big ticket for you there. Matt, are you going to give us a big ticket, and are you going to employ the same strategy in the Derby with spreading as Caleb does?
No, I'm going to get a little bit more narrow. I'm going to wrap up in the Derby. We're going to play the pick 5 that concludes with this year's Kentucky Derby. And you can see I'm only going to go too deep in the Derby itself with the favorite Journalism and Burnham Square, who we'll talk about more in a little bit. But the key to this sequence for me, Caleb, is that Derby City Distaff. On paper, it looks like an absolute scrum and a half. I'm going to lean into Copian. I just think the California import is better than these girls. She missed a little bit of time at the end of March, beginning of April, but if Richard Mandela has her on the plane here, she's ready to go. And
$24, I mean, you can add to that or even play it multiple times, but for a challenging sequence with the Kentucky Derby, $24, very affordable.
And Caleb had mentioned that Turf Classic being an absolute skullbuster. Right. I like Cameo Performance, kind of the same idea as Spirit of St. Louis, widest in that rundown of the fairgrounds. I think both of them took the worst of it.
And most of those horses in that turf race are coming out of the Munez Classic. That was one of the slowest turf paces we've had all year. Big long shot. I'd rather be blessed, wire them. So I think the key in the Old Forester is judging the Munez and that really slow pace.
Caleb, year after year, I feel like we're always talking about the Superfecta. I know it's a wager that you love in the Kentucky Derby. Why does this one always draw you in, and do you have a bet for us this year?
I just feel like every year when you look at the chart, you can see in hindsight a path to hit a big number. You could have keyed, Sierra Leone last year and had some realistic horses around it. The minimum this could pay is $500 because look at 2016. That was favorite, second choice, third choice, fourth choice in order. All favorites. It still paid $542. Pretty similar with American Pharoah. But you also have the land of opportunity, maybe 10,000 plus.
So how do you play the Superfecta this year then?
Okay, so for the Turf Pick 3, I took some different options on the win end. But for the Super, because it's $1, I'm going to put Journalism up on top here in the win spot. Then I've got the 4 Rodriguez, the 7 Luxor Cafe, who I really think can hit the board. The 10 Grande, again, I'm buying stock on this horse moving forward. I'm going to give East Avenue, the 12, another chance, plus the 18 Sovereignty in second and third. And then in fourth place, I'm going to add the 17 Sandman, who will be one of the favorites. I'm going to key off that Tappet kind of ceiling in fourth so far. And also the number 13 Publisher. I like this maiden all year. I think he could hit maybe the bottom rung of the Super.
Matt, you went lean in the Derby as far as that pick 5 goes. A bomb horse that could hit the Super for you if you're playing it?
I think Tistastic absolutely could. And maybe he doesn't fit that traditional mold of a bomb, but he's going to be at least 20-1, Caleb. And he's the kind of horse that I think is coming into this year's Derby on a peak performance. He ran very well in the Louisiana Derby. He had a big pace to run at, and I don't think it can be overstated how similar Fairgrounds is to Churchill Downs. Long stretch. That race was at 1 3/16. They'll run 1.25 miles Saturday. I think Tistastic can get a piece.
And if you compare Tistastic and Sandman, they're the exact same horse. They were in the same race in the street sense. Tistastic was ahead of Sandman. They both had 2 losses to start the 3-0 campaign. They both won the final prep with a hot pace, except Sandman had a supersonic pace, so he's a little bit faster. So they've been the same horse. Sandman 5-1, Tistastic 25-1.
How are you remembering all that? You don't even have your form open.
We've been following him for 6 months.
Let's stay on this. It's time for the lightning round, and luckily Caleb has it all off the top of his head. So we talked about bombs in the Super. Who's the most likely horse, in your opinion, to hit the Super?
I think Sovereignty is. I mean, this is a racetrack that he likes. He's going to be a closer. He should get the pace that he needs to run at. And as far as a Bill Mott trainee for the Kentucky Derby is concerned, I'd argue this is the likeliest candidate that he's ever had.
Yeah, not to just back in, I guess, to the obvious source, but, you know, if you look at journalism, even if he were to get defeated, 10 of the last 13 favorites have been 1 or 2. Now, they've been finishing second because we're actually on a little bit of a streak where the favorites have not won, and we've also seen 5 straight May Derbies where the winner was coming off of a defeat. But ultimately, journalism, I think, has to be in there.
Caleb, we talked about all those speed horses expected to line up on the front end. If I set the line at 46-3 to the half, are you taking the over or the under?
46-3 has been pretty much the exact number of some recent derbies. I was considering that maybe they'll get clever and try to slow it down, but ultimately, the last 9 derbies have gone 46-3 or under. Citizen Bull just worked 45 and change the other day.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would take the under, and I think the under would be juiced to about -150. It just feels like, Christina, there are too many speed horses in this race who have the same running style for this to not be 46 and maybe even into the 45s.
Matt, a horse under 10-1 that you think will disappoint in this year's Derby?
We may have tipped our hand a little bit. I think it's Sandman, just simply because I don't think he's a completed project just yet. It doesn't mean that he may end up being the best of this lot when all is said and done. I just don't know that Saturday's the day.
And I'm going to have to agree there because, again, I've watched the film. He's never run straight through the stretch. And I don't think that 99 Beyer is going to be reflective. That was the second fastest half mile in the last 20 years at Oaklawn. So you got a slingshot setup. Not going to be the same case here. I feel like the public is on Sandman and the handicappers are a little against.
Dubs, if you're still back in the studio, earmuffs, don't listen to this one. We had Forever Young last year, so much hype, and he delivered. He was involved in that photo. He's gone on to be one of the best older horses here in 2025. But is Luxor Cafe, Caleb, worth the hype?
I think that he's actually one of the most exquisitely bred horses in the race. American Pharoah's first crop, he had a horse named Cafe Pharaoh, and they were getting all the buzz that he was going to come over and win the Kentucky Derby. Well, he didn't end up making the trip. Also has a sister, Regal Glory, who was a Grade 1 winner at Keeneland. And I thought he was decent when he won 2 starts back, but he was excellent when he won last out.
No offense, Dubs. I'm going to say no. If Forever Young couldn't get the job done last year, or maybe he was unlucky not to get the job done, I don't think Luxor Cafe can get it done here. If he does win Saturday, I think that's more a knock against our horses than it is a vote of confidence for him.
We've covered these horses since last year, their 2-year-old season. All of those points races on their way to the starting gate first Saturday in May. Best prep, in your opinion?
I think it's the Rebel. You look Coal Battle, Sandman, Publisher, Tiz-tastic. They're all going to be running in this race. Sandman won a Grade 1. Tiz-tastic won a Grade 2. Publisher finished second in a Grade 1. I think it's the Rebel.
I wouldn't call it a prep. If you go back, we're going to show you the race in the street sense. You could argue that actually Sovereignty winning the street sense might have been the best race in total, but ultimately I'm going to go with the Santa Anita Derby. You know, Umberto Rispoli, who of course rides journalism, he told Michael McCarthy, the horse we have to beat is Baeza. They knew Baeza was ready to run a huge race, and he did. You had the champion in there as well, and had the best speed figure.
And how unique is that with Baeza still sitting on the outside looking in? If they're that worried about him, we'll see if he does end up getting in. Let's flip the coin on that. Caleb, worst prep leading up to the Derby this year?
So the Jeff Ruby's been a hot race. Rich Strike plus 2 fills running second, and Seize the Gray came out of it to win the prelims. I don't feel that this Jeff Ruby is very strong. Not that it's going to get overbet, but I'm hearing a wise guy feel to Final Gambit. This guy was stuck in mid-60 Bayerland. Now he wins the Jeff Ruby. Now all of a sudden the hot horse here from most of the pundits thinking that he could run a big one. I'm going to go against the Jeff Ruby.
I'm going to go to the Wood Memorial. Rodriguez, unfortunately, I don't think he's going to get the setup he needs to be successful on Saturday. And then Grande, he's a bit of a wise guy horse. I think it's a lot to be thrown at him in a short amount of time.
Let's circle back to that street sense you mentioned, Caleb, as one of the races that has produced quite a few runners this year. And it's interesting that these horses were so forward at their 2-year-old season and have carried on into 3.
And a loaded field with 2 major prep winners, plus Sovereignty was second in the Florida Derby. And let's go back. Sovereignty was a maiden in the race. He had just missed last out. Outside post for a closer, not necessarily an advantageous setup. Tiz-tastic and Sandman, Matt, they were basically in lockstep this whole race.
Yeah, and the beauty of this race, for these horses to be as good as they have continued to be here as 3-year-olds, we get so caught up in 2-year-olds and precocity and who's fast. These 3 horses are all bred for 1.25 miles. And because they've just been quality animals and they've been handled by exceptional connections, they're all here the first Saturday in May, and they all have a chance.
And they showed, too, I think this day that they were going to be distance horses. Christina, this is also a testament to the year-round racing circuit that Kentucky's building. The street sense was not a key race in recent years, but now you have big-time trainers with their top horses running in this race, and now they get serious. It's kind of be a relay race at this point. Tiz-tastic makes the first move. Sandman's gliding him high, and then Sovereignty, widest of all, going to win this thing by 5 under wraps.
When you
Bill
think
Mott
about
has
Bill
to be
Mott,
happy seeing this.
yeah, when you think about Bill Mott having a horse this good that early, that was probably the tip-off.
Listening to Bill Mott this morning on the breakfast show as well, he just sounds so at peace with the way the horse is doing and coming into this race. And I think that that's something that can't be underscored. When you're a trainer, there's so many things to think about. There's so many variables to try and control. When you're coming into a race of this magnitude, everything does have to go perfectly well for you. You can't have any of those hiccups along the way. You need to know your horse is going to fire their best shot.
And, you know, he won that race by 5, but considering he was widest of all and never really got encouraged, you could argue he was maybe 7 lengths better, at least on that day.
All right, we've gone over a lot of information, the pace, the pedigrees, the replays, the preps. Matt, who is your Derby horse?
I've been married to him since January. I'm not going to divorce him now that we're finally here. Burnham Square, to me, is a horse that is ready for a peak performance. He's going to get the pace that he needs to run at. I know some folks may question the form of that Bluegrass, given we had 3 horses across the wire, but I think all systems go here for the Ian Wilkes trainee. And most importantly to me, Caleb, this is a horse that's already run well here at Churchill Downs. His run as a 2-year-old prior to blinkers going on was really good. I think that kind of tipped his hand as well.
And I really appreciate that you went for a better price. And I've spent the last couple of weeks, you know, considering going for a better price here on the board. But ultimately, journalism, a son of Curlin, the highest buyer of any Curlin coming into the Kentucky Derby. This guy reminds me of I'll Have Another. 2 races in California. He doesn't have that instant reaction where he blasts home, but he's just got this stride where with each and every stride, so determined through the lane. Going to be a tough one to hold off. I'll take the favorite as the pick.
Does he qualify as the Omnifig horse of this group?
Not technically, because others have run races faster than some of his other races.
Okay.
An Omnifig would constitute someone who's run every race faster than everybody else.
Okay, but this year, in 2025.
Yeah.
That's your field for this year's Kentucky Derby. Hopefully, we have helped you find your Derby horse, maybe choose a few wagers that you're going to use that information in and maximize that opinion across the 2 days of racing. If you still need a little more information, jump on in early tomorrow and Thursday morning for our final 2 days of breakfast at the Kentucky Derby. 4 days remain until the first Saturday in May. We'll be here each and every day bringing you live on-site coverage of the racing that leads up to the Kentucky Derby. And we'll take a quick time